Okay, we're back for chapter 7, part 3, I think. And we'll be moving on to chapter 8, hopefully, as well. The Gryffindor first years followed Percy through the chattering crowds out of the Great Hall and up the marble staircase. Harry's legs were like lead again, but only because he was so tired and full of food. He was too sleepy even to be surprised that the people in the portraits along the corridor whispered and pointed as they passed, or that twice Percy led them through doorways hidden behind sliding panels and hanging tapestries. They climbed more staircases, yawning and dragging their feet, and Harry was just wondering how much further they had to go when they came to a sudden halt. A bundle of walking sticks was floating in midair ahead of them, and as Percy took a step forwards, they started throwing themselves at him. "Peeves," Percy whispered into the first years, "a poltergeist." He raised his voice. "Peeves, show yourself." A loud, rude sound, like the air being let out of a balloon, answered. "Do you want me to go to the bloody Baron?" There was a pop, and a little man with wicked dark eyes and a wide mouth appeared, floating cross-legged in the air, clutching the walking sticks. "Ooh," he said with an evil cackle. "Ickle firsties? What fun!" He swooped suddenly at them. They all ducked. "Go away, Peeves, or the Baron will hear about this. I mean it," barked Percy. Peeves stuck out his tongue and vanished, dropping the walking sticks onto Neville's head. They heard him zooming away, rattling coats of armour as he passed. "You want to watch out for Peeves," said Percy, as they set off again. "The bloody Baron's the only one who can control him. He won't even listen to us prefects. Here we are." At the very end of the corridor hung a portrait of a very fat woman in a pink silk dress. "Password," she said. "Caput Draconius," said Percy, and the portrait swung forward to reveal a round hole in the wall. They all scrambled through it. Neville needed a leg up and found themselves in the Gryffindor common room, a cosy round room full of squashy armchairs. Percy directed the girls through the door to their dormitory, and the boys through another. At the top of a spiral staircase, they were obviously in one of the towers. They found their beds at last. 5 four-posters hung with deep red velvet curtains. Their trunks had already been brought up too. Tired to talk much, they pulled on their pyjamas and fell into bed. "Great food, isn't it?" muttered Ron to Harry through the hangings. "Get off, Scabbers. He's chewing my sheets." Harry was going to ask Ron if he had had any of the treacle tart, but he fell asleep almost at once. Perhaps Harry had eaten a bit too much, because he had a very strange dream. He was wearing Professor Quirrell's turban, which kept talking to him, telling him he must transfer to Slytherin at once, because it was his destiny. Harry told the turban he didn't want to be in Slytherin. It got heavier and heavier. He tried to pull it off, but it tightened painfully. And there was Malfoy, laughing at him as he struggled with it. Then Malfoy turned into the hook-nosed teacher Snape, whose laugh became high and cold. There was a burst of green light, and Harry woke sweating and shaking. He rolled over and fell asleep again, and when he woke next day, he didn't remember the dream at all. Chapter 8. The Potions Master. "There, look." "Where?" "Next to the tall kid with the red hair, wearing the glasses." "Did you see his face? Did you see his scar?" Whispers followed Harry from the moment he left his dormitory the next day. People queuing outside classrooms stood on tiptoe to get a look at him, or doubled back to pass him in the corridors, again staring. Harry wished they wouldn't, because he was trying to concentrate on finding his way to classes. There were 142 staircases at Hogwarts, wide sweeping ones, narrow rickety ones, some that led somewhere different on a Friday, some with a vanishing step halfway up that you had to remember to jump. Then there were doors that wouldn't open unless you asked politely or tickled them in exactly the right place, and doors that weren't really doors at all, but solid walls just pretending. It was also very hard to remember where anything was, because it all seemed to move around a lot. The people in the portraits kept going to visit each other, and Harry was sure the coat of armours could walk. The ghost didn't help either. It was also a nasty shock when one of them glided suddenly through the door you were trying to open. Nearly Headless Nick was always happy to point new Gryffindors in the right direction, but Peeves the Poltergeist was worth 2 locked doors and trick staircase if you met him. You were late for class. He would drop waste paper baskets on your head, pull rugs from under your feet, pelt you with bits of chalk, or sneak up behind you, invisible, grab your nose and screech, "Got your conk!" Even worse than Peeves, if that was possible, was the caretaker, Argus Filch. Harry and Ron managed to get on the wrong side of him on their very first morning. Filch found them trying to force their way through a door, which unluckily turned out to be the entrance to the out-of-bounds corridor on the 3rd floor. He wouldn't believe they were lost, was sure they were trying to break into it on purpose, and was threatening to lock them in the dungeons when they were rescued by Professor Quirrell, who was passing. Filch owned a cat called Mrs. Norris, a scrawny, dust-coloured creature with bulging, lamp-like eyes like Filch's. She patrolled the corridors alone. Break a rule in front of her, put just one toe out of line, and she would whisk off for Filch, who would appear wheezing 2 seconds later. Filch knew the secret passageways of the school better than anyone, except perhaps the Weasley twins, and could pop up as suddenly as any of the ghosts. The students all hated him, and he was the dearest ambition of many to give Mrs. Norris a good kick. And then once you had managed to find them, there were the lessons themselves. There was a lot more to magic, as Harry quickly found out, than waving your wand and saying a few funny words. They had to study the night sky through their telescopes every Wednesday at midnight and learn the names of different stars and movements of the planets. 3 times a week they went to the greenhouse behind the castle to study herbology, learned how to take care of all the strange plants and fungi, and found out what they were used for. Easily the most boring lesson was History of Magic, which was the only class taught by a ghost, Professor Binns, who had been very old indeed when he had fallen asleep in front of the Staff and Fire and got up next morning to teach, leaving his body behind him. Binns droned on and on and on, while they scribbled down names and dates and got Emric the Evil and Uric the Oddball mixed up. Professor Flitwick, and Charms teacher, was a very tiny little wizard who had to stand on a pile of books to see over the desk. At the start of their first lesson, he took the register, and when he reached Harry's name, he gave an excited squeak and toppled out of sight. Professor McGonagall was again different. Harry had been quite right to think she wasn't a teacher to cross. Strict and clever. She gave them a talking to the moment they had sat down in their first class. Transfiguration is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts, she said. Anyone messing around in my class will leave and not come back. You have been warned. Then she changed her desk into a pig and then back again. They were all very impressed and couldn't wait to get started, but soon realised they weren't going to be changing the furniture into animals for a long time. After making a lot of complicated notes, they were each given a match and started trying to turn it into a needle. By the end of the lesson, only Hermione Granger had made any difference to her match. Professor McGonagall showed the class how it had gone all silver and pointy and gave Hermione a rare smile. The class everyone had been really looking forward to was Defence Against the Dark Arts, but Quirrell's lessons turned out a bit of a joke. His classroom smelled strongly of garlic, which everyone said it was to ward off vampires he'd met in Romania, and was afraid would be coming back to get him one of these days. His turban, he told them, had been given to him by an African prince as a thank you for getting rid of a troublesome zombie. But they weren't sure they believed the story. For one thing, that Seamus Finnegan asked eagerly to hear how Quirrell had fought off the zombie. Quirrell went pink and started talking about the weather. For another, they had noticed that a very funny smell hung around the turban, and the Weasley twins insisted that it was stuffed full of garlic as well, so that Quirrell was protected wherever he went. Harry was relieved to find out that he wasn't miles behind everyone else. Lots of people had come to Muggles' families, and like him, hadn't any idea that there were witches and wizards there was much to learn, and even people like Ron didn't have much of a head start. Friday was an important day for Harry and Ron. They finally managed to find their way down to the Great Hall for breakfast without getting lost once. "What have we got today?" Harry asked Ron as he poured sugar on his porridge. "Double potions with Slytherin," said Ron. "Snape's head of Slytherin's house. They say he always favours them. We'll be able to see if it's true." "Wish McGonagall favoured us," said Harry. Professor McGonagall was head of Gryffindor House, but he hadn't stopped her giving them a huge pile of homework the day before. Just then the post arrived. Harry got used to this by now, but it had been given him a bit of a shock on the first morning when about 100 owls had suddenly streamed into the Great Hall during breakfast, circling the tables until they saw their owners and dropping letters and packages onto their laps. Hedwig hadn't bought anything so far. She sometimes flew in to nibble his ear and have a bit of toast before going off to sleep in the owlery with the other school owls. This morning, however, she fluttered down between the marmalade and the sugar bowl and dropped a note onto Harry's plate. Harry tore it open at once. "Dear Harry," it said, a very untidy scrawl. "I know you get Friday afternoons off, so would like to come and have a cup of tea with me around 3. I want to hear about you and your first week. Send us an answer back with Hedwig. Hagrid." Harry borrowed Ron's quill, scribbled "Yes, please, see you later" on the back of the note, and sent Hagrid off again. It was lucky that Harry had tea with Hagrid to look forward to, because the potions lesson turned out to be the worst thing that happened to him so far. And we will be back for part 2 of chapter 8. Bye-bye.